So what's happening in Ottawa with all those dollars that you're paying every single paycheck and every time you buy something at the store and you pay the GST? What's happening with those billions of dollars that we give to the federal government? Today we've got Franco Terrazzano in. He's the federal director from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's going to give us an update on a few different issues. Franco, thank you for taking a few minutes to chat with us today. I know there's a lot of big issues happening in Ottawa, as there always seems to be. I want to start first and just talk to you about this high-speed rail line that is, I believe it's going ahead 100%. I want to get your take on that. But could you just tell us a little bit about the cost, what the project involves, and what your thoughts are?
Well, I'm glad we're starting here because this might be the most expensive taxpayer boondoggle yet, which is saying a lot. I mean, look, construction is years and years away at best, but what the government is proposing is like 1,000 kilometer high-speed train line between Toronto and Quebec City. So just one corner of the country, but taxpayers from coast to coast to coast are going to be picking up a huge price tag for this, right? The government estimates that this is going to cost between 60 and $90 billion. So, Colin, first of all, when the margin of error is $30 billion, you know you're in for some trouble as a taxpayer. But even at the low end, Colin, if you're looking at $60 billion price tag, that's going to cost the average family of four like $5,000.
It's a huge amount of money. I mean, it's staggering when you start to figure out what this is going to cost per household. But I want to come back to something I alluded to there. Is this thing 100% going ahead, or are they still sort of at the planning stages?
Well, they're still at the planning stages. I mean, we're years away from any construction, right? The last I've heard is that construction may start sometime in 2029. But look, you know when I said the 60 to $90 billion, like that could be best case scenario for Canadians, which is absolutely crazy. So a couple things. Number one, we've seen governments study this for decades, and it seems like every time they come up with a new cost estimate, it's going higher. But number two, you look around the world and cost overruns with these types of rail projects is not the exception. It's the rule. Okay, let's talk about California for a quick second. So when California first started talking about this, costs were supposed to be about $33 billion, be finished around 2020. Well, fast forward to today, and in California, not a single meter of track has been laid, and the price tag has ballooned to close to $130 billion. But Colin, you know what the iron rule of these government mega projects are? Let me read it for you here. Over budget, over time, under benefits, over and over again.
I think people could understand that. I mean, you look at major projects that have happened in this country in the last, 10, 20 years, the big hydro project in Newfoundland, hydro projects in Manitoba, the big pipeline deal in between Alberta and BC, their Trans Mountain. I think it was supposed to cost $8 billion-ish, and it came in once the government nationalized the project over $30 billion. I mean, you're right. These projects always go well over budget. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Franco. They're saying 60 to 90. Let's say you and I are talking, whatever, 5, 10 years from now, and they build this thing. What do you think the final price tag is going to look like?
Yeah, so let's look around the world, right? Because I mentioned California, but it's not like I'm cherry picking here. Okay, so if you look around the world, the average cost overrun for these types of rail projects, mega rail projects, is about 40%. Okay, so again, I said overruns are the rule, not the exception. So you look around the average, and you're looking anywhere from about $80 billion to $125 billion. Okay, so even at the low end, it will cost the average Canadian family of four with those overruns about $7,000. And for what? Like, folks, this is not a priority for the vast majority of Canadians, right? You go talk to somebody in Brooks, you go talk to somebody in Saskatoon, they're footing the bill, and I bet you it's not even among the top 10,000 priorities for them.
Now, to play devil's advocate here, is this one of those projects where maybe, a lot of people groan, because sometimes this happens with government projects, people groan and then they build it and decades later everyone goes, well, that actually was a good deal, it turned out. Is that a possibility in your mind? Let's say it comes in at $60 billion. Is there a business case for it at $60 billion?
No, if there was a business case, you would just have the private sector doing this. right? The private sector would build it. You'd have just companies involved. They would charge a fee. So if there was a legitimate business or economic activity, then just let the private sector do this, right? We are more than $1 trillion in debt federally, interest charges costing more than $1 billion every week. There's no money for this. It's not a priority. And if it was economically viable, let the private sector do it.
Okay, listen, we're going to go from one mega project to another. When we come back, I'm going to chat about the Gordie Howe Bridge with Franco Terrazzano. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back on 2nd Street chatting with Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We're talking about government mega projects and some of the big issues that are happening in Ottawa right now. Franco, you were pretty fired up for the first segment. I'm not sure that this one's going to cool you down because it's got me scratching my head here. The Gordie Howe Bridge project. Could you tell us what's going on there for people that, maybe you've seen it in the news, but you haven't really been following it?
Yeah, so let me just be super layman's here, right? Just give you kind of the overview, the lay of the land. So number one, there seems to be a pretty big lack of transparency coming from the federal government on the details and really the impact to taxpayers. But number two, it seems like the new deal struck between the Carney government and the Trump administration, it seems pretty clearly like it's worse for taxpayers compared to the original one, right? So what happened, folks, is that Canadian taxpayers picked up the full price tag. It was just over $6 billion to build the bridge, right? Connecting Canada to the United States. Now, we were supposed to be recouping the money to pay back, the debt, the interest costs, and just recoup some of the money that, we spent paying to build the bridge. Now, fast forward to the new deal, and, the details still seem a little murky. However, a big chunk of the money will be going to a U.S. controlled development fund, probably for that side of the border. So, the takeaway for taxpayers is that we paid for this thing, us Canadian taxpayers. We were supposed to get the money back to pay back the debt, to pay for the bridge, and now we're getting less. So at the end of the day, the time to recoup that money that Canadian taxpayers paid into this is going to be extended, right? It's going to take longer for us to get our money back.
Yeah, it seems like we just totally caved. I mean, Trump decides suddenly he wants half, and we just kind of go, okay, or whatever. Whatever happened to the commitment to, elbows up, we're going to bargain hard with Donald Trump? I mean, it just seems like we're getting walked all over by the United States in this deal.
I mean, it certainly doesn't look good, that perception for the Prime Minister of Canada, right? Especially that was pretty much his key campaign plank back in the 2025 election, right? Parties, they offer a whole bunch of stuff, but I think it's fair to say that what he tried to sell Canadians on is that he was the guy with the plan to get the deal done. I mean, clearly, to your point, it definitely doesn't look that way. But you know what I'm also upset about here from a public policy perspective, a very substantive thing, is the lack of transparency, right? You had the Carney government saying one thing, then the details come out and they seem different. But even now, like, the big question for Canadian taxpayers is, look, we footed the $6 billion to build the bridge, right? Now it seems like we're going to be getting less of the profit back. So the key question for the government is on the transparency angle now. And it's like, hey, how much further or how much longer are we going to have to wait until we get our money back? Like, that is the key question. And as far as I know, that hasn't been answered fully by the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, they should be upfront and transparent about these deals, especially because it's government to government. It's not government and private sector. I don't even really buy it then, but I don't think there's any excuses. I will say, Franco, I read an article over the weekend, and it got me thinking about this project. I think there was something that they did get right, and that was calling it the Gordie Howe Bridge. I know this is a small concession here because we're talking about billions of dollars here, but I thought that's a good name, right? You've got, he's a Canadian. He played for the Red Wings. The bridge is going to Detroit, Michigan there. Certainly makes sense. I want to shift gears here, and we'll talk about this in the next segment too, but this latest MOU between Alberta and the federal government to build a pipeline from Alberta, another one from Alberta to British Columbia. I want to get your initial thoughts on that deal.
Well, my initial thoughts is like what the government is doing is completely unsustainable. Okay, so they impose a whole bunch of taxes and a whole bunch of regulations that chase away investment, chase away private job creators, right? So they impose these taxes, they impose these regulations that make it almost impossible for any private sector component to build a pipeline or another major natural resource project here in Canada with their own money. And then what do? well, then they, shell out a huge bucket of taxpayer cash to try to get this thing done. I mean, that is so unsustainable. I mean, to me, and we can get into the details a little bit more, but to me, like, the solution is actually pretty simple here. How about you take away the taxes and the regulations that make it impossible for the private sector to actually build stuff here in Canada, that make it almost impossible to encourage the type of investment that we need here in Canada? You remove those regulations, remove those taxes, so we can get the private sector job creators actually building these major natural resource projects here in Canada with their own money and not with taxpayers' money. Like, I think that's the problem: is government regulations, government taxes driving away these job creators, and now its government is unsustainably subsidizing these projects with a whole bunch of taxpayers' money.
I don't disagree with you, sir. When we come back after the break, we'll continue to chat about this new proposed pipeline. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back on 2nd Street chatting with Franco Terrazzano, the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, before the break, we were chatting about the new proposed pipeline from Alberta to BC. The numbers that I found in between the break here suggest that the Trans Mountain project went from about 7 to 34 billion. What do you think is going to happen if they actually get this thing built in terms of cost with this new one they're talking about?
Oh, I mean, we're always worried about cost overruns, but you look at the cost of constructing it even before you factor in any overruns, and they're already staggering, right? We've seen some estimates say that the cost of this constructing this new pipeline could be upwards of $40 billion. The private company involved only has a 10% stake in the construction of the pipeline. So, I mean, taxpayers, like, get ready to pay a big tab. But here's the thing, right? Even if the government tries to claim, like, look, it's going to create all these economic benefits, there's a couple things we have to keep in mind. Number one, we do need pipelines in Canada, but they should not be subsidized with taxpayers' money, right? Get rid of the regulations, get rid of the taxes that are deterring private sector from actually building these major natural resource projects with their own money. Because, you take the government, even if their claims are at face value, the obvious pushback is like, well, the private sector should have been building this thing at the first place, not having taxpayers on the hook for potentially enormous costs for the pipeline, right? Get rid of the regulations, get rid of the taxes that are stopping this type of development, and let the private sector build these major natural resource projects.
Look, I don't disagree with what you're saying. Let's, for a second, think about this from Premier Smith's point of view for a moment. She didn't have much luck when Prime Minister Trudeau was in office. And now you've got a Prime Minister who seems more open to some of these major oil and gas projects going ahead. And they're unlikely to get rid of, as you point out, a lot of the government blockades that are stopping the private sector from wanting to build these projects. So if you're Premier Smith, are you looking at the numbers and maybe saying, yes, we shouldn't do it this way, but it's still better than nothing because spending the money provincially on one of these pipelines will still end up with a net positive for the province in terms of tax revenue and jobs and whatever? Is it that? Could you make that argument if you're Premier Smith?
Well, I'm not going to be making an argument for the premier of any province, right? That is not my job. What my job is to say, no, this is completely unsustainable. So what are we going to do now? Just subsidize every major project under the sun because the government doesn't let these private sector entities build these major projects. So what, now you got to get taxpayers' money on everything? Like, I actually think this creates a pretty bad incentive for the future, right? Like, oh, hey, don't worry if you can't get something built. It's just governments are just going to put taxpayers on the hook for more projects. And I'll go back to what I said, the first question that you asked me on this. This is completely unsustainable. We have to get rid of the regulations. We have to get rid of these taxes. We have to draw a line in the sand because it's not fair. Two, it's unsustainable to just have taxpayers' money being thrown at these projects that can and should be done by the private sector if the government's just got out of the way on the anti-development laws, taxes, and regulations. Right now, one thing on Premier Smith though is that Premier Smith never came out and wanted to scrap the industrial carbon tax. right? At one point, Premier Smith froze it, but she never did what Scott Moe did in Saskatchewan. What Scott Moe did in Saskatchewan, he said, no, we're not playing this game. We're going to completely get rid of the industrial carbon tax. What Moe did is he made Saskatchewan the first carbon tax-free jurisdiction in Canada.
Interesting. Good point. It is concerning that you've got a federal government major projects office where it's like they're basically telling the world that, look, if you want to invest in a project, you have to go through this one office where we're going to hand pick things because all of our regulatory processes are just too slow and burdensome. Are you seeing any signs that they're going to fix that issue to make it more streamlined? Because if you think about it, the major projects are getting attention. What about the medium-sized projects and the
Mm-hmm.
small-sized projects where maybe their proponents don't have the political connections to get things through the government? Are you seeing any positive signs that we're seeing some of this red tape cut and out of the way so that those projects can proceed?
Well, let me just say, like, that is the issue with how the major projects office is designed, right? We're relatively few
Hmm.
projects that are deemed in the national interest by politicians or bureaucrats get to go forward. But at the heart of it, what they should be doing is not creating this, major projects office that picks winners and losers, but go in there and take away the bad regulations that are deterring investment from the private sector in the first place, right? Cutting those regulations and taxes
Yeah.
is where the government should be focusing.
Okay, when we come back, we got to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be chatting about some of the expensive food that we are paying for as our officials in Ottawa go on different flights. We'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back to On 2nd Street. We're chatting with Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, we've been talking about some big projects that cost billions of dollars. I want to change gears here. Your organization's been digging into the cost of food on flights that the Prime Minister's been going on. Could you tell us a little bit about some of these numbers that you've dug up?
Well, let's talk about the most recent story that we published, and it's a staggering amount spent on airplane food and billed to taxpayers, right? So Carney and his
Hmm.
55-person entourage, they took a single week-long trip internationally to places like Athens, Abu Dhabi, Johannesburg, and they ended up spending $160,000 on airplane food. Just the airplane food, $160,000, right?
Hmm.
To put that into context, you have the Prime Minister and his entourage spending more money on airplane food than what the average Canadian family spends on groceries in about a decade, right? And one of the
Right.
problems that we see here is you just see multi-course gourmet meals being billed to the taxpayer, right? They're dining on like Chilean sea bass. You have beef tenderloin with pepper sauce. You have slow roasted cod with tarragon cream sauce. I'm getting hungry just reading the in-flight menus. And of course, they had a little tasty treat known as death by chocolate. But folks, let me bring this back to the substantive point here. Okay, you have Prime Minister Mark Carney, who's repeatedly said that he's going to spend less money. But if you're not even willing to spend less money on airplane food, then where are you going to find the savings?
Yeah, I think a lot of people hearing these numbers, myself included, would say, okay, look, we don't expect our prime minister to be eating McDonald's on an airplane or, have like super cheap, food that isn't so good. He's in the highest position in the land. If you want good people, you got to be able to, spend some money to get them. But at the same time, I mean, these numbers are just astronomical. It seems like for any of these meals, the total cost would be far less if you just went to a nearby restaurant and bought them and then brought that food onto the plane or something like that. Why are the costs so high per person per meal?
Well, Colin, I'm glad about that question because number one, it's like, come on, folks, like, you don't have to spend $160,000 on airplane food, especially when Canadian taxpayers are struggling, right? Like, we all know how many people are
Yeah.
just struggling with the price of groceries, and yet their tax dollars are going to pay for a six-figure airplane food, on one international trip. It's like, come on. But the second thing, let me just say, is it doesn't have to be this way, right? A prime minister, other senior officials can and have been able to fly internationally before without billing taxpayers six figures for airplane food. We have another time Carney went
Mm.
abroad for one of these international trips. He billed taxpayers under 10,000 for airplane food, right? So it can happen. We have another example of the former defense minister who spent about $2,300 okay, on airplane food during an international trip. There's another case of the
Yeah.
chief of defense staff billing taxpayers $0, according to government records, for airplane food. So, look, a prime minister can and should be able to fly around the world without billing taxpayers six figures for airplane food.
Okay. Point well taken. We need to get the Prime Minister to talk to that former Minister of Defense and say, how'd you do it? I want to change things very quickly. I wish we had more time, but I think generally speaking, any government, no matter what political stripe, you're going to find things that you don't like, and you can always find something that you do like. Oh, is there anything really positive that you think is happening in Ottawa right now that maybe you think the public should be more aware of?
Can I just give a huge shout out, huge kudos to MP Mike Dawson? Because, he came out this year, as you may be aware, every year members of parliament take a pay raise on April 1st. Yeah, the joke's on taxpayers every year. They've actually
Yeah.
taken 14 consecutive annual pay raises. But this year, something different happened. You had MP Mike Dawson, who said, you know what, folks, I don't want a pay raise. I don't think I should be taking more money from my Canadians. So he publicly called out the pay raise. And right now, actually, he's trying to go through the legal process to stop the government from forcing him to take extra pay. So I just got to give a huge kudos to MP Mike Dawson, okay, for having the courage to do what's right and to be like, you know what, folks, I don't think MPs, or at least himself, should be taking a pay raise when Canadians are going through tough times.
Okay, well, there you have it. We got something good happening in Ottawa. Franco, as always, thanks for your time today.
Hey, thank you, Colin.
As always, thanks for watching.